Hello and welcome back to another Stardew Valley installment. Today's video is all about how designing your farm or revamping your farm might actually be a lot more easier than you think, and making your farm look aesthetic just like those late game farms you always see is actually quite easy to get to, especially with these tips. To start off, let's actually find out how much space we actually have so we know what we can play with. Now, if you've chosen any other farm other than the standard farm, you would know that you actually have some limitations. The standard farm is essentially one big square, whereas the Riverland farm has a lot of water and bridges, so you don't have a lot of farmland to play with. To show you how much space the standard farm actually has, I was able to fit in 36 slime hutches, which is the biggest building that you can place down via the carpenter's shop. A slime hutch will take up 11 by 6 spaces, and when placing down 36, you approximately get yourself 2,300 spaces that were taken up. Now, there were some extra free spaces I couldn't put a slime hutch down, so give or take, you've got roughly 2,500 square spaces to place things on your farm. Now, I know that number sounds quite daunting, but why am I telling you this number? Well, it's to actually show you how much space you have so you can actually play along with different ideas. Now, let's consider what you want to place down on your farm. Most people like to go to the carpenter's shop, have a look at the buildings they can place down, and start to work out what they want to place down from there. Excluding the crops you're going to place down, the buildings are going to be one of the most important things that you place down on your farm. You don't have to place all of them from the carpenter's shop, but there are 10 different buildings that you can place down. Now, I really can't consider the stable and the shipping bin that you can purchase as buildings via the carpenter's shop. So essentially, you've got 8 buildings that you can place down. You've got a barn that takes up a 7 by 4 spot, a coop that takes up 7 by 3, a pond that takes a 5 by 5 spot, a mill that takes a 4 by 2 spot, a shed that takes up a 7 by 3 spot, a silo that takes a 3 by 3 spot, a slime hutch that takes an 11 by 6 spot, and a well that takes up a 3 by 3 spot. Now, when placed all alongside each other, you will see that they actually don't take up too much space. And this is all because, just like I mentioned previously, it depends on what kind of buildings you want to place down and how many you want to place of each. If you're starting a new farm, only place down the buildings that you're comfortable with and place them into an area that you can easily access when you leave your farmhouse, because you're most likely going to be placing down a barn and a coop, and your animals will need daily attention so they can benefit you in the long run. Always consider to place the buildings that you need to give daily attention to closer to your farmhouse, and something that doesn't really require that much attention, such as your crops if they have sprinklers, a little more further away. Now, when looking at aesthetic farms, especially if you're on Reddit quite frequently, you can tell that they look really nice. Everything looks like it's placed in the correct space. They've got their floors and their trees looking real pretty, and everything looks like it's quite separated really well. The reason for that is most people that try to go for an aesthetic feel will actually try and make their farms look symmetrical. A farm that has a symmetrical look to it will actually look a little more better than a farm with buildings placed all over the place. But that's not saying that the farms that are designed that way are going to look ugly. But a good rule of thumb is, if you want to try and make your farm look a little aesthetic, why not try and make it look symmetrical? Maybe place 2 of the same buildings right next to each other and mirror their design on each side so they look the same on either side. Likewise, you can do a mixture of flooring if you want to do a floor piece around your farm to walk along, and maybe different floor pieces to separate different sections, such as your barns using the wood floors and your sheds using the stone flooring. Separating different sections of your farm is also a really good idea, and this can be done with fences or trees or even with your floor pieces again. If you've already got yourself a farm set up and you've got yourself some buildings placed down, if you have a look at your farm, you may have some things on your farm that are kind of just sitting around there and you're waiting for future you to deal with. This is inclusive of your machines that are producing new items and also your chest for organization. I would definitely suggest placing these within a building of your choice, whether it's your farmhouse, a shed, or even a coop and a barn. That way you can free up some space and potentially place down another building via the carpenter's shop to potentially make you more money. Plus, it'd be really nice to have all your machines in one place so you're not having to run around your farm and wasting time where you can be saving that time for something else. Likewise, it's a really good idea that once you have your greenhouse ready, to plant your fruit trees within here rather than your farmland. The reason being, the space around the crop area within the greenhouse can actually be room for your fruit trees, and it doesn't matter what season it is, these fruit trees will produce you fruit. Whereas if you place them on the farmland, they will only produce you fruit within the certain season that they're meant to produce you fruit. I have a video on how I design my sheds in different situations, so if you are deciding to place down a shed and you need a little bit of organizational tips, I will leave that here for you to go and check out. In every design that I've ever suggested, I've always told people to start off with flooring. Flooring is not only a really nice aesthetic that you can place around the farm, but you can use it from multiple other ways, such as separating certain areas, such as your farm animals on one side and your crops on the other. But it's also a way that you can travel around your farm without debris being in the way. Your character actually walks 0.1 faster when walking on these floor places, so I definitely suggest placing these down, but in a way that it is easy for your character to walk along. Maybe you can have one type of floor piece that you place down around your farm as a walking path, whereas the other type of floor pieces kind of separates your areas. Just like suggested before, you can have the wood pieces for your coops and your barns, and the stone pieces for your sheds and your ponds. This way you can delegate certain areas to do different things for you by the different looks of the floor pieces. An idea is that you can delegate certain areas of your farm with different floor pieces, as this will be one way that you can separate your farm to make it look a little more aesthetic. The same can go for fences as well. I only suggest using fences around your coops and your barns to keep your animals within there instead of them running all about, especially if you need them in one place so you can pet them. But this can also be used to separate other areas of your farm. For example, if you have a random part of your farm where it's just grass and some trees, separating it off with some fences will actually make it look like it's meant to be there. With the idea of separating your farm with some fences and some flooring, it's actually a really good idea to also consider what is already placed on your farm that actually needs to cover an area. What I mean by that is, for example, bee houses are actually more beneficial when they're placed next to some flowers. Flowers that are grown into their certain seasons will actually allow these bee houses to turn their honey into that type of honey. So if you've got yourself some grown tulip, that bee house, when it produces its next honey, will turn into tulip honey. And the same goes for the other flowers that are grown around it. The range of a bee house is 5 square spaces, vertical and horizontal each way, and every square within it. So you don't need to be placing many flowers for that reason. You just need to make sure that this bee house is in reach of that flower. The same goes for scarecrows as well. If you need more inspiration on how to use up the space on your farm, I definitely suggest checking out places such as Reddit. There is always these late game farms that I always check out, and I think they look absolutely wonderful. I always take in some ideas that they've done and combine some other ideas that they have and see if I can mix it all together to make something, different on my farm. But in saying that, don't get yourself too worked up with these late game farms. Some people have been playing Stardew Valley for quite some time, and sometimes on that singular save, they've spent hours upon hours designing their farm. The grass is always looking greener when we look at these farms because we then start to compare it to our farms and we think that we can never reach that. With time and practice and many trial and errors that you'll have, eventually you'll get to the farm that you're happy with. Keep it up, and if you need some inspiration, I definitely have some other videos you can check out, and I'll put a playlist here of some farm layouts that I've done for all the other farms in Stardew Valley if you need some ideas. Guys, before I let you go, I finally released my website fuzzalicious.com, which will not only have some merch in the future, but also has some candles that I've been making. Some are gaming candles that you will notice, and some are aesthetic candles, so if you're interested, I'll leave the link below. International shipping is available as well. Guys, I love your faces. I hope you're doing absolutely well, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.